All right, welcome back to the deep dive. You guys know the drill, right? You send us the cool stuff, and we dig into it, figure out what makes it tick.
That's right. Today we're going deep on something a little off the beaten path, even for a history buff, I would say.
Yeah, I mean, we've covered some pretty obscure stuff, but the Battle of Saint-Pierre. Now, that's not something you hear about every day.
Definitely not your typical textbook American Revolution story, that's for sure. But that's kind of the point of these deep dives, right?
Absolutely. So what we have here, folks, are well, excerpts, some really interesting excerpts. They paint a vivid picture of this clash that took place on March 25th, 1776. And we're talking about the village of Saint-Pierre in Quebec.
Right. And it's important to keep in mind the bigger picture here. The Continental Army, they were in the midst of besieging Quebec City. And, they'd suffered a pretty serious setback earlier.
Yeah, not exactly riding high on momentum at this point. So this Saint-Pierre thing, it's all happening against that backdrop.
Exactly. It's a fascinating little piece of the puzzle that helps us understand the complexities of the war in Quebec, really.
Okay, so when we think American Revolution, our minds naturally go to those 13 colonies. But these sources you sent, they they really show just how far north the conflict spread.
Oh, absolutely. In fact, early on, the Second Continental Congress, they extended an invitation to Quebec, hey, come join the fight. But
Didn't exactly pan out the way they hoped.
not quite. And that led to, well, to an invasion. The Americans, they were determined to oust the British from Quebec. And this whole push, it culminated in a pretty significant battle, the Battle of Quebec, December 31st, 1775.
And that one didn't go so well for the Americans, did it?
No, not at all. General Montgomery, he was killed, and over 400 American soldiers were taken prisoner. Really a turning point. I mean, in the early stages of the war, especially in the North.
You'd think that kind of defeat would be a real stopper,
Mm.
but the siege continued.
Right. It did. Despite those losses, Benedict Arnold, he took command and kept the pressure on Quebec City. And, meanwhile, both sides, both the Americans and the British, they realized something crucial.
What's that?
They couldn't just ignore the local population. The Canadians, the French-speaking inhabitants of Quebec, they were a key factor in all of this.
So it's not just a straight up fight between the British and the Americans. There's this whole other layer of winning over the hearts and minds of the people who actually live there.
Right. The Americans, they saw the Canadians as potential allies, potential revolutionaries. But the British, under Governor Guy Carleton, they were just as determined to shore up loyalist support among the Canadians. So it's a real contest for influence happening alongside the military campaign itself.
Okay, so you have this really interesting backdrop, but what was the spark, the specific event that kicked off this Battle of Saint-Pierre that we're looking at today? What got things going as far as these documents show?
Well, that's where Jean-Baptiste Chasson comes in. He was a miller from Saint Vallier. And one of the sources actually refers to him as chasseur. But, same guy.
Okay, so what about this chasseur? What makes him so important?
On March 14th, 1776, he makes this really crucial journey. He crosses the St. Lawrence River to get to Quebec City, and he's carrying vital information. He tells General Carleton that the Americans, they're setting up a gun battery at Point Levis.
Point Levis. Now, for folks who aren't, super familiar with the geography here, why was that such a big deal?
Well, Point Levis is on the south shore of the river, and a battery there, that would give the Americans control over the harbor, basically. And any shipping on the St. Lawrence, it would be a huge problem for the British.
So this is not just some random battery. This is strategically significant.
Exactly. And Chasson also mentions something else. He tells Carleton that there are people south of the city who are, well, let's say they're not too happy with the Americans and are, ready to push back.
Okay, so Carlton's got this new information. What does he do?
He acts quickly. He gives a crucial mission to Louis Léonard de Beaujeu, the seigneur of Îlot Gros. That's Crane
They
Island.
look Crane Island. Okay, I'm with you. And this Beaujeu fellow, who is he?
He's a veteran of the French and Indian War, so experienced military man. And Carleton entrusts Chasson with instructions for Beaujeu. He's got some intercepted American communications, showing how tough things are for them during the siege. And he's also offering an amnesty. Basically, anyone who supported the Americans but now wants to switch sides, they're welcome.
Smart move by Carlton.
Yeah.
So how does Beaujeu respond to this? Does he just, like, round up a bunch of people and head straight for Point Levis?
He had already been asked to raise a local militia, right? So now he's got even more reason to do it. And he does. By March 23rd, he's got over 100 men assembled at Saint-Anne-de-la-Pocatière. And then as they move closer to their target, they pick up another 70 men at St. Thomas.
So we're talking a force of over 170 men now.
That's right. But they don't all go to Point Levis. They send a smaller group ahead.
Okay, how many?
46 men. It's an advance guard led by two guys, Couillard and Gaspé.
Couillard and Gaspé. Any idea who these guys are? They're just names in a document, right?
Well, the source actually gives us some pretty good clues about their identities. It suggests that Gaspé might have been Ignace Philippe Aubert de Gaspé. He inherited the seigneury of Saint-Jean-Port-Joli later on. And get this, he was also a French and Indian War veteran.
So he and Beaujeu probably, they probably knew each other from back in the day.
Quite possibly, yeah.
Like,
And Couillard, the source says he was likely an heir to one of the Couillard de l'Espinay family. They had these seigneuries, these big land holdings in the Rivière du Sud region. It even specifies that this Gaspé was the seigneur of Saint-Jean-Port-Joli and Couillard was the seigneur of St. Thomas in Rivière du Sud.
so these are not just random guys. They're local leaders, important people.
Exactly. And their advance guard, they set up shop at the house of Michel Blais. Sometimes it's spelled Blais. He was a known loyalist and a former militia commander himself.
Okay, so the loyalists they're mobilizing, but I'm guessing the Americans didn't just sit around twiddling their thumbs.
Right.
How did they find out what was going on?
Well, there were people in Beaumont who supported the American cause, remember? And they got word of what Beaujeu was up to. And they warned the American commander at Point Levis.
So there's spies and informants on both sides.
It's a good way to put it, yeah. Anyway, General Arnold, he doesn't waste any time. He sends 80 men under the command of John Dubois to check things out.
And of course, the Americans, they'd been doing their own recruiting, right? It wasn't just a British thing.
Right. Pierre Yotte and Clément Gosselin, they were recruiting for Moses Hazen's 2nd Canadian Regiment. That was a regiment made up of Canadians fighting for the American side. And they managed to enlist about 150 men.
Wow. So you have these two sides, both drawing support from the same communities. It's neighbor against neighbor in some cases.
Yeah, and it gets even more tangled. You remember Chasson, the miller who brought the news to Carleton?
Yeah, what about him?
Well, he was actually captured by a group of Beaumont militia in Saint-Michel as he was trying to get back to Quebec City. So you can see how interwoven everything was.
It's amazing how these individual stories, these small events, they all connect to the bigger picture.
It really is.
Okay, so we have these two forces heading towards each other. What happens when they finally meet at Saint-Pierre?
Well, it seems like the Patriot forces, they completely surprised the Loyalist advance guard. The Loyalists, they scramble to barricade themselves inside Michel Blais's house. But Dubois, he doesn't hesitate. He attacks, using muskets and even a cannon.
Oh, wow.
The Loyalists, they try to hold out, but they're outnumbered and outgunned. Most of them end up surrendering, though some manage to escape.
And what about casualties? Any idea how many people were killed or wounded?
The source says at least 3 Loyalists were killed and over 30 captured. And their priest, Charles-François Bailly de Messine, he was wounded. American losses. The numbers are a bit fuzzy, but somewhere between 3 and 6 killed, about 10 wounded, and then maybe 21 to 38 prisoners, depending on which account you look at.
Okay, so it's a clear victory for the Americans at Saint-Pierre. And, it's crazy to think that some of these guys fighting each other, they might have been like neighbors or even relatives, right?
Absolutely. It really underscores the divisions within Quebec at that time. It's not just British versus American. It's also Canadian versus Canadian.
So the Americans win this little battle, but did it change anything in the bigger picture? Like, did it improve their relationship with the local population?
Not really, no. The sources suggest that relations were already strained, and this skirmish didn't help much. The main issue, the Americans were paying for supplies with paper money, continental currency, or promissory notes.
And those were not exactly popular.
Let's just say the locals didn't have much faith in them. They saw them as pretty much worthless, and that caused a lot of resentment, probably more than this one battle at Saint-Pierre.
So the Battle of Saint-Pierre, it's a dramatic event for sure.
Yeah.
But in terms of the overall war, it's more of a symptom of existing tensions than a turning point.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. It's a very specific example, but it tells us a lot about the broader situation. It shows that the American invasion of Quebec, it wasn't just a fight between two countries, it was also a civil conflict with Canadians on both sides.
All right, so let's wrap this up. What are the big takeaways here? What should we remember about the Battle of Saint-Pierre?
Well, I think the most important thing is that it shows us just how complex the American Revolution really was. It wasn't black and white, us versus them. There were all these different layers, all these different perspectives. And the Battle of Saint-Pierre, that's just one tiny piece of it. But it's a piece that reveals a lot about the local dynamics, the human side of this huge historical event.
Yeah, it's a reminder that history is made up of countless individual stories. And sometimes those stories are just as important as the big battles and the famous generals.
Exactly. The Battle of Saint-Pierre, it might not be in the textbooks, but it gives us this really valuable insight into what life was like for ordinary people caught in the middle of this huge conflict.
And it makes you wonder, right? How many other stories like this are out there just waiting to be discovered, stories that can teach us even more about the past and how it shaped the world we live in today. Thanks for taking us on this deep dive. I think we all learned a lot today.